I want to get on a different subject for a moment here, and I want to ask a question of how many of you know how many world takeover attempts there has been in the past. And I'm going to run down just a couple. I spent a lot of time in Mexico, South America. Spanish is not their original language. They speak Spanish because they were conquered by the Spanish, who killed millions and made slaves out of who was left. Then the Spanish set out to take over the world, and that's why so much of the world speaks Spanish. The British did the same thing, which is why so much of the world speaks English, and it goes back and back and back. And you know who actually conquered the most amount of land in a world takeover attempt was the Mongols under Genghis Khan 300 and something years after Christ, and it goes back to before the Bible, before Christ. And then all the other takeover attempts, and even in between all that, there's always some tyrant who rules through fear, torture, murder, and slavery. It's been going on all my life, man, all around me. This is actually what all of history looks like. Because I've lived in this time, in this place, it's easy for me to believe that this is what's normal. This is not what's normal. That's what's normal. And they're trying to take us back. Now, the people who came to America, they got on wooden sailing ships to cross an ocean to go to a land that was completely wild. And they didn't do it to get rich, they did it to get free. They were under the lash of King George III, who was a tyrant like all the kings were. You know, the peasants having to pay the king's men and all that stuff. And so when their freedom was threatened, they were all on the same page, man. They weren't having it. And this is how we came to have a country that's been relatively free for so long. The guys who did this, trying to keep their freedom, they tried to make rules to stop this from happening again. And one of the things that was the most important was free speech. This is why free speech is the First Amendment, because the media's job is to keep an eye on what the big guys are doing and then rat them out to us. But all the mainstream media is now owned by 6 billionaire globalists, okay? And this is where we're getting the censorship that is absolutely illegal in this country. And they knew that if we did not have freedom of speech, we could not continue, that the country would fail. And so we all know that government is no longer following the Constitution for anything, and especially the First Amendment. They are censoring us everywhere, okay? And here's the problem. The problem is that the people are not following the Constitution either. We need to follow the Constitution. At least that's how I see it. And let me talk about how that's done. It's not so hard to do as a person might think. When they started this Big C thing, I could see something wasn't right. And I began to ask people, what do you know, in my travels? And some people knew, and they would tell me what they know. And I'd ask, where'd you get your information? And they would give me a link. And I'd go look at their link. And this is how I began to learn that there's a whole section of the internet that is still completely free speech. A large section, actually, if you go there. They don't want you to, but if you do, there it is. And this is how I began to learn about news outlets like the High Wire, which is Del Bigtree. He used to work for CBS. He don't want to do the Lion. He had his own news outlet now, or news whatever, broadcasting. And he's the one who actually got the dirt on Fauci that Senator Rand Paul hung him with. And I'm not going to get into how he did that. I began to learn about like Rebel News out of Canada, and we have Don Bongino over there, and all these other news stations. And these are places where they're talking about what's really going on. Because I'm going to tell you, the vast majority of our people have no clue what's really happening. We're being conned. That's what makes propaganda so important in this, is because if we weren't conned, they couldn't do shit. And so I kept all of those links that people gave me, a bunch of them, and I would leave them in the comment section of some of my videos. Very few people would actually go to them, I think. Some did. But over time, what I've done is narrowed it down to just a couple of sources that pretty much bring everything. There's other ones too, but there's two that are easy to use. One of them is rumble.com, and the other one is odyssey.com, and I will leave you guys links to those. And these are video platforms just like YouTube. Now, if you've never seen a video platform before, and I told you this, I'd say, look, we got YouTube over here. It belongs to the globalists. It's full of censorship. It has a lot of propaganda and it's loaded with commercials. But then I have these other ones over here that do not belong to big tech, that belong to the people, that are completely free speech and have no commercials. It's kind of a no-brainer. It's amazing to me how many people I begin to show what's actually going on and they didn't have any clue, because what the mainstream's telling us is not it. So I believe, and it seems obvious, that the people need to adhere to the First Amendment. Whether you're in America or in some other country, you can get access to these things because they're on the internet. And so I'm going to leave you these two links, and there is apps for them, which I keep putting them on people's phones. I just did it again for a friend of mine yesterday, and I've made a video about how to use these things, and I'll leave you guys a link to that in the description below. And I will also leave you a link to these two sites. If you just use Rumble and Odyssey and you start looking for news on there, because there's all kinds of other stuff too. I mean, it's just like YouTube, there's motorcycle stuff and, you know, camping stuff and every other goddamn thing on there, especially on Odyssey. I don't know Rumble, I haven't searched for that stuff that much on there. But if you subscribe to some of these news channels, I mean, lots of people love Don Bongino, and Dan Bongino, I don't watch him too much, but there's some really good ones on there. And with that, you guys, I'm going to leave you with this. I'm hoping, I'm just putting this on there, that I'm hoping that America will start exercising the right to free speech. The Americans, this is like, people aren't realizing how important this is right now, and that they will stick to the First Amendment, and rather than accepting censorship, that more of us will go seek uncensored truth. You know, that's one of the main things that's made this country great. If everyone exercised their First Amendment rights, there would have never been any reason for Elon to buy Twitter, because there are free speech alternatives to all of those platforms. Be it Telegram, I believe is an alternative to Twitter, MeWe, which is an alternative to Facebook, and then there are various YouTube type channels. There's Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, there's even a couple of others. It's all there. It's all on the same phone. It's all on the same computer. It's just a matter of going over to it. And I'll see you guys on the next video.